I've been asked to talk about the roadmap for reopening. And the perspective I bring to the conversation is from a corporate communications, strategic communications perspective. My number one tip to my clients and to anyone who asks that it has to be employee-centric. The very first thing you need to do is to put empathy and the care and concern of your employees number one. Guests are watching how you treat your employees. And if a guest feels that your employees' concerns are not being heard, then they will make the determination if they're going to reconnect with you. So safety and security is the number one thing. Making sure that your people are put over your profits in this important stage. So with so many people doubled up on responsibilities right now, it's completely overwhelming in normal times, let alone that you're contending with how do you reopen when the villain is still at large, when the virus is still there. This is not like 2006 when MGM Resorts reopened Beau Rivage after Hurricane Katrina. The natural disasters pass. The challenge right now is that this is not a one and done exercise, but you can't go radio silent. The pent up demand here in Las Vegas is that employees are beginning to hear what some of those reopening plans are. They're putting pressure on the state. They're putting pressure on their employers to let them know, A, will I have a job? And B, will I be safe when I come back to work? So while the early part of the crisis was all about speed over perfection, this is another case of balancing that message. So don't go silent. You do need to let employees know you have a plan, even though you're working on it. That it's highly collaborative. This cannot be an exercise that HR and marketing and legal and casino operations do in silos. The team needs to come to the table with the plan, get the plan thoroughly vetted, and then begin to re-engage your workforce. Let them know you may not have all the bells and whistles in place. You may not have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, but let them know that you do have a plan. And first and foremost, it's about them, because your employees will not engage with you and they won't engage with a customer until they can feel safe. Employers have far more credibility in their court right now than any of our government entities. The Edelman Trust Barometer released a study back at the end of March saying that employees are looking for guidance from their employers. It does need to reflect the guidance coming from the local authorities, but you have to leverage that. So take advantage of what you have right now. In addition to using technology as your platforms, find those trusted internal advisors. Appoint a team of champions who can help you get the message out to the front line and down through the ranks. It's a combination of high tech. I won't call it a combination with high touch because that's the wrong way to describe it. But that personal interaction, even if it's just a phone call from your supervisors to employees to let them know what the plan is and that it's coming around, will go far. I've been asked on several occasions, how, what, and why? How can you possibly train employees on health, safety, and sanitation before they even come back to the workplace? And the strategy for that is to use all the tools at your disposal. You have their ears, they're listening to you. Re-engage with every channel that you have in your arsenal. But don't forget the human element. Don't forget that your champions, those trusted frontline supervisors, can go far in making sure that that message is loud and clear. And when you begin to bring them back, obviously we can't come back into the conference room or convention space atmosphere that we are accustomed to when we're communicating and beginning to train with employees. It's going to be done in phases, small groups, a little bit at a time. But that doesn't mean you need to put all of your focus on a very serious and somber, complex message. Introduce gamification. Introduce some fun into the training and communications. Get employees re-engaged with who you are as a culture And that will go far in helping your message resonate. It's very important to ensure that your communications speak with one voice, one source of truth, but that they are activated using all of your appropriate channels in a highly synchronized fashion. This is the opportunity for the marketing team who oversees social media and your corporate communications team who is working with your public relations, public affairs, and internal comms teams to be sure that they have absolutely a synchronized plan that is rolling out across the organization and that it is aligned with the guidance you've received from your local and state health authorities.
So today we're talking about the industry preparing to re-enter and reopen, as we're talking about different markets taking different approaches. And I think today, as an analyst, we look at the innovation group at forecasts of projections. So while our counterparts on the operations side and at the property level are putting together their physical operating plans and determining how to use the space and how to deal with social distancing, we're focused on helping them understand what type of demand and forecast patterns will arise. So as a company, we do this kind of for a living, but through the last few weeks, we've been thinking a lot about the impacts of the regulatory regimen. So social distancing, will there be players potentially at every other machine, every third machine? So we put together a forecast model to look globally with emphasis on U.S. Markets with a very robust reporting at what this might look like. And in the next 12 months, we looked at what recovery rates might look like if reopenings began starting in May and into June, as we're seeing really this week with some of the tribal casinos in the Pacific Northwest. And when we roll it up at a national level, the recovery is quite dramatically different with and without social distancing in place. So we see recovery patterns without distancing, just pure demand, really reaching from the mid-60s to the mid-80% range in the course of the 12-month period following the reopenings in the midst of the pandemic. With these social distancing measures, so roughly 3 out of 5 positions filled, we see that drop to the 35% to the mid-60% range in terms of capturing that demand. So that's a national forecast. I think to be useful and actually provide a forecasting tool, we have to be able to look regionally. So today I'll just share 2 extremes of that national average. If we look at recovery of gaming demand in the next 12 months for a region that's been hardest hit by COVID-19, so the northeastern United States, we're looking at that constraint being down in the high 20 to low 30% range and not quite reaching the mid 60% range, the low 60% range of recovery. By contrast, we can look at the mountain region of the United States. This, of course, includes many of the plain states, many states that have not suffered with as dense a population and impact of the virus. And we see them exceeding the national average, perhaps recovering into the higher 30% range and into the mid 70% range at the end of the first 12 months. So, of course, these estimates are highly sensitive to what? To regulatory impacts, how much social distancing will be required, what will be the nature of the food and beverage offering at the property, how many restaurants will be open, will there be entertainment, what type of entertainment? Because we expect theaters, for example, to find their way a little more slowly than food and beverage establishments. So that, of course, will impact the customer experience. Secondly, we're looking at customer sentiment. How do they feel? Do they feel safe? Do they feel like they can go out and enjoy themselves? And then finally, how is the health of the economy and how that impacts decisions? So if we're looking at budgets and we look back to periods such as the Great Recession, now looking back over a decade, we can see that play can be constrained just purely on an economic basis for some period of time. So these are the key factors. I think the important thing to remember as we go into reopening is that there's going to be variation. and different jurisdictions and different populations and different demographics will behave differently. And being prepared and being flexible as we reopen, which we always contrast with pre-opening, right? In the industry where we open a new property, we overstaff. So reopening is a different ball of wax, and we're going to all work through it together. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, everybody. I've been asked to speak to you about our plans for reopening Wynn and Encore Las Vegas. As you know, our CEO, Matt Maddox, has taken a lead on many of the health and safety issues facing our employees and our guests, and published before even our local health district had published health and safety protocols, which would allow us to reopen safely. And those protocols have really set what we believe is the gold standard for reopening our properties. We, of course, are consulting with our local and state agencies to make sure that as they give us additional advice, that we include that advice into our protocols. But at this point, we are very comfortable that we are doing all that we can to ensure the safety of our guests and our employees. And it's very interesting to realize that when focus groups have been asking our customers when they want to come back to Las Vegas, all of them have identified as their number one criteria the safety with which they can visit our lovely resorts. So we think that this is not only beneficial to our employees whose well-being we value, but it is a business imperative that we issue these guidelines for health and safety. We've taken incredible steps. We've gone from the bottom up, not the top down, and have spoken to our operational leaders to come up with methods to engage in what we call physical distancing and sanitization and disinfecting protocols. So, for instance, we talked to our pit bosses about how we could operationalize with reducing the number of people who would be sitting at a gaming table. We spoke to our slot department managers and said, how can we configure our slot floor to make sure that people are physically distanced that 6 feet. We've taken it from the perspective of what our employees see when they walk into the building, the temperature checks that they will undergo, the questionnaire that they'll have to complete, which asks them questions of, have you been feeling well? Do you feel well? Have you been around anybody who hasn't been feeling well? So that we give our employees the comfort that we are taking their safety very, very significantly. And then we took it from the guest's perspective. What is the guest going to see when they first walk in? We're going to greet every guest. There will be someone who will open the door for them. They'll be asked to put on a mask, which of course we will supply for them. They will go through a thermal temperature screening device, and if they register a fever of 100.4 or more, they will be asked to undergo a secondary screening, which will be done in a discrete location so that their privacy is respected. If a guest is on our premises and feels ill, or an employee feels ill, we will call for the guest, our ambulance service, to come take them to one of our local healthcare facilities. And for our employees, we'll ask them to go home and see their provider. One of the things that we're quite excited about is that we are offering all of our employees COVID-19 testing to ensure that when we reopen with a healthy workforce. So we're quite proud of the steps that we are taking. And again, we continue to monitor the recommendations of our governments in Massachusetts, Nevada, and the local authorities, as well as the gaming commissions and gaming control boards that regulate us.